How's everybody doing? It's Joe here from Webercast, and today we're going to be talking all about Vileplume. Now, before I actually get into the discussion or about what I want to talk about, I want to say that this video is going to be split up into like two parts. So this is going to be a slightly different format for me. I think there's just too much that I want to talk to you guys about Vileplume about, that I don't want to cram it all into one super long video. I'd rather just spread it out for the people who want to just watch the games, or the people who just want a quick overview, and the people who want like the full in-depth talk about Vileplume, because I've got quite a lot to say, quite a lot of different ways that I think this guy can be run. So in the description annotation on screen, there will be a link to another video where I'm going to be playing some games with the list that you see on screen now. That's what I'm going to be using in those games. And if you want to know like more in-depth information about this list, that's what this video is going to be for. I'm going to be talking about Vileplume, why it's good, what kind of decks you can play it in, what kind of attackers you can play with it. I'm going to be talking about how to build a Vileplume list completely from scratch. So I think it's important to talk about this guy anyway, because with all the item luck gone, Toad and Trevenant both left the format. We've only got this guy left. Well, and Hoot Hoot, but Hoot Hoot sucks, so we've really only got this guy left if you want to play item lock decks. So I think it's worth talking about it, and I think it's worth seeing what is the best possible way to run it. Anyway, onto this video. So, obviously we're going to be all talking about Vileplume. In the first place, we know how good item lock is. I want to talk about just why this thing's good, like, in general. So, item lock is fantastic. Vileplume's the only viable item lock left, so obviously we have to find a way to play it. That just goes without saying. It's also already seen success last season. We saw it in a couple of different decks. We saw Sam Huff's ridiculous Rainbow Vileplume thing being at the end of top 4 Worlds. Vileplume Vileplume was a really dominant deck in the meta for quite some time. So we need to find new ways to play this guy, since, both those decks are fine, but I think there are definitely other ways you can play it anyway. I also just, on a personal level, really like Vileplume. Even as a kid, Erica and her Gloom in the anime were just super cool, so I was like, I don't know, it's always been one of my favorite Pokemon, so I enjoy playing it a lot. I'm probably going to be testing it at least a lot this season and playing it a lot, so I wanted to definitely go through my thoughts on it and how I'm running it at the moment, and how I think you should be building Vileplume completely from scratch. So first of all, we can't really make any more speed variants of Vileplume, or not, at least not as fast as Vileplume Vileplume was, because, well, obviously that deck lost Battle Compressor, which was a huge asset to it, but also the deck was kind of built to beat non-EX Pokemon. It wasn't built to do super high amounts of damage, and without Battle Compressor, it's going to be doing even less amounts of damage. So we basically need to find new partners for it, sort of slow down a bit, take the pace back, and see what are the new partners that emerge for Vileplume. But to sort of describe this deck, I'm going to first start off with what the necessary parts are to sort of go with Vileplume in the first place, so that you guys know exactly what you need to be running with Vileplume to make it work. This is at least what I've been running with, and what I think is good. I'm not saying it's 100% the right answer, I'm just saying it's been super consistent for me so far, and I have no issues with it. So first of all, of course, we have a 3-2-2 line of Vileplume. I think this is the lowest that you can go if you want a Vileplume-centered deck. The reason being is that if you cut down to one Gloom or one Vileplume and it's prized, you just lose the game right there. Sorry, I just coughed there briefly. So I think you need to run at least 2 copies of all of them. Having said that, I like to run a higher count of Oddish, because you want to see it first before you see the Gloom and the Vileplume. So I think it makes sense to run more of these guys than the other ones. That's why I have it as a 3-2-2, because you need this guy down super early on. So if you can see this guy in your opening hand, that's exactly what you want. So I think 3-2-2 is fine. I've had no problems getting it up, and I don't think I need to increase it or decrease it. I think that's as low as I'm willing to go. The other super key players for Vileplume in terms of Pokemon is Bunnelby. Bunnelby is probably the most essential partner for it, and I'm really glad Primal Clash stayed post-rotation, because it means that Vileplume's best friend remains in the format. Basically, Bunnelby is our big answer to the deck, a big one-card answer, really splashable because it's only one colorless energy as well. The reason we run this is because a lot of the decks work off of the discard in this format. We see cards like VS Seeker, Special Charge, Super Rod, Puzzle of Time, all these cool things. Vileplume cannot run any of these, just due to the inherent nature of the card. So we need to find some other way to sort of help out with our discard pile management. And the best way to do that is with a single card in any Vileplume list. You can just run one Bunnelby, and it does a perfect job. Rototiller has been super useful for me in all of the games I've played. It allows us to get away with like even one-off supporters. It allows us to get away with really high special energy counts. It's super super good. On top of that, Burrow's not a bad attack either. I've actually won 1 or 2 games just because my opponent benched something with a high HP, with like a high retreat cost, and I just Lazoned it up, lock it into the active because they can't play Floatstone or Switch, especially with AZ gone out of the format. Nobody's just running Olympia in random decks. So it's been really cool to just lock things in the active and just use Burrow to mill my opponent. It creates this like whole other win condition, so that's pretty cool. On top of that as well, like, your opponents don't really have control over what supporter they play, so they're probably going to be playing like Sycamore a lot. Like, instead of playing like Sycamore and then like OVS Seeker for N, they can't really do that. Like, almost every deck in this format runs 4 Sycamore, which means that when they draw into it, if they want to draw more cards, they have to play the Sycamore, and that means their deck actually gets lower quicker than you'd expect. So the mill option and the deck out option is very present with Bunnelby. Yeah, it's just a non-EX attacker as well. You can just promote it and force a 7 prize game. Yeah, plenty of reasons to love this guy. I think 1 copy of this in any Vileplume list is just a huge part of the deck. We're also running 4 Unknown, and I believe you should run as many copies of Unknown as you can fit into your list. The reason it's so good is because there are cards that like you can play to thin out your deck on turn 1 to try and get the Vileplume turn 1, and then there are cards you can play to dig after you've gotten the Vileplume up, like supporters. Unknown does both. It's able to dig for the turn 1 Vileplume, and it's able to help you dig after you get the Vileplume. So when you put it that way, I mean, there's really no reason you can't include this guy. It's also just a great level ball target as well early game if you've already got your Audition Gloom out. I think you get an awful lot of play out of this card. I wouldn't really go any less than 3. If you're really tight on space, I think I could cut one of them, but I think the 4 count is just super comfortable. The other super essential Pokemon then, of course, is Shaman EX. I think 3 is the perfect number, because running 2 is too low, I think, because if one of them is prized, you're just basically not going to get the Vileplume up at all. I mean, like, you can, if neither of them, if none of them are prized and you have both of them in your hand, or in your deck even, it's like, you will get it up, but only most of the time. There will still be times you missed it because you weren't running a 3rd Shaman, and I think that's just crucial to the whole deck strategy. I also wouldn't run a 4th, partly because we're never going to need to play all 4. We also just straight up don't have the bench space for 4 Shaman, so we're only ever going to be playing 3 anyway. You can just Ultra Ball for it anyway, so it's not like you need it in hand. I think 3 is perfectly fine. The other thing about Shaman is, after you get the item lockup, you lose like your level balls, your trainer's mail, your ultra balls. You lose all the cards that help you thin your hand size down. So that means that if you're running Shaman, you have to play a turn 1. You're not going to be playing Shamans like after turn 1 unless you get like very late game and you get end to a low hand size. Other than that, it's just going to be, you're only playing this guy on the first turn of the game. So you need to be explosive with it. But yeah, that's really the only essential Pokemon. And on to the partner that I've picked for Vileplume. So I think when it comes to Vileplume, you want to keep it relatively simple. Like, getting up a Vileplume itself and sort of dedicating the space to it is difficult enough to do that you don't have enough room left for complex strategies on top of that. So you really just want like a basic attacker that can be powered up in about 2 attachments, and also, if it contributes in some kind of locking effect as well, that's also really good with Vileplume, of course. So Giratina, I think, just makes a lot of sense. So, like, Renegade Pulse, obviously, with all the Mega decks going around right now, Renegade Pulse is just a fantastic ability, we all know that. Especially trying to play around this when you're also being item locked is just, when people are running like 1 copy of Hex Maniac at most, this becomes very difficult to play around. Chaos Wheel then actually synergizes with Vileplume really well too, because it stops your opponent playing Stadiums or Special Energy. And along with Mega Scizor, I think this is like one of the only decks that is just not afraid of Stadium Wars at all. Because, like, if you notice, this deck runs 1 copy of Silent Lap, and we get so much use out of that because we can just play it and then lock it in place for a bunch of turns, because our opponent can't counter it because they can't play any Stadium cards. The other really cool thing is it locks tools. So this means that if our opponent is playing Hex Maniac and Garbodor, and they're like, okay, well, I've got a Trubbish on the bench, so I'll play Hex Maniac, I got my items back. They still can't attach a Floatstone to the Trubbish because Chaos Wheel is locking them from that. So there's a few cool things that this guy provides. Also, just 100 damage is a big number, especially when you're item locking. It's a lot more than Quaking Punch did, so it's quite nice to have. And with a Fury Belt, you're hitting 110, and that fixes a lot of math, but I'll go into that a bit later. The only reason I don't really like Giratina is this Fairy weakness right here. Because a lot of Fairy decks are emerging. I do have some answers to that, but I'll get to that a bit later in this video. Also, the 3 retreat cost is really nice because it allows you to run Heavy Ball. And Heavy Ball, thank you to Rory for putting me onto this card, actually. It's been really good in the deck. Yeah, this thing allows you to search out anything with 3 or more retreat cost. It creates this, like, good consistency boost for the deck because you're not really able to run Hoopa in this. Because you just do not have the bench space for Hoopa, and you can't run Skyfield because you need to run Forest of Giant Plants in turn 1. So you don't have the room for Hoopa. But you do have the room for Heavy Ball, and this lets you search out the Giratina in an easy way without having to commit to your bench space. And it also, of course, can find Vileplume because this also has a 3 retreat cost. So anything with, like, this is why I kind of think Giratina feels like a natural partner for it, at least. There's an awful lot going for it. Really, like I said, though, any basic Pokemon with a very simple energy requirement goes well with Vileplume. On top of that, if you like, you can get away with like stage 1s, provided they are also grass types, I think, so that they can kind of work in tangent with the Forest of Giant Plants, which is partly why Vespiquen Vileplume was so good anyway. So yeah, that's really my thoughts on the Giratina. I think it's the best partner that I've thought of so far. There's plenty of other ones though, and I will discuss them all a bit later. I'm currently running this with Magearna EX as well. So Magearna EX actually, Mystic Heart provides an awful lot of defense for this deck. So of course, Double Dragon Energy will count as a metal energy because it provides every energy, which means it activates Mystic Heart. So people will try and break the Giratina lock in like weird ways. Zorua has an attack that can just confuse you. Froakie and Pikachu have attacks that paralyze you. Trubbish actually has an attack, and Mega Mewtwo players will try and do this, where you can flip a coin if heads discard an energy attached to your opponent's active. And of course, the big one is Promo Jirachi, which will single-handedly just run through this deck on its own. But with Magearna EX in play, none of these cards work anymore. We can just happily sit there with Giratina with 2 Double Dragon, and we're not going to get like any special conditions. We're not going to get any energy discards. Mystic Heart really puts in the work for this thing, and it's super easy to do. Like I said, with Vileplume, you kind of want to keep things simple to get the most out of it, and all you have to do with Magearna is bench it. So yeah, you get an awful lot of use out of this guy. Anyway, yeah, that's the Pokemon line. It's been running fine for me so far. You got to be kind of careful with the amount of basics you run, like I said, because bench space is an issue, because you probably have like 2 Shaymins and a Vileplume, and then on top of that you've got like you've got 2 more bench spaces left. If you started Unknown, that's by far the worst starter in the deck. You're now in an awkward position too, because that's like even 1 less bench space, because you have to sort of be powering up on the bench as opposed to be powering up in the active. But, you know, it's workable. So that's why I'm keeping it relatively simple. On to the items. And a point I want to make about the items is that you obviously can't, ideally, like, you're not going to be able to play any of these item cards after turn 2. Because you'll have the Vileplume up on the first turn of the game. So what you need to do is, basically, if you're running an item card, it needs to be because it helps you get the Vileplume into play in the first place. And anything beyond that is just a luxury. So, as you can see, I'm running 2 Fury Belt. That's the only card that I'm running that is like, it's not there. It's an item card that doesn't help me get the Vileplume up, but I had the room for it, and it significantly improved a couple of games. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna win and lose. I'm gonna win games that I would otherwise lose if I play Fury Belt, and I think that's worth the inclusion. So you got to be really careful about the item cards you put in the deck. You can't get away with anything like Max Elixirs or Super Odds. Even things like Special Charge are kind of risky. And all of these things are... This is why the Bunnelby is so good, again, is because you don't have to be sort of relying on running these, like... These kind of weird one-off item cards that if you don't draw into them on turn 1, you're not going to play them ever. The Bunnelby just solves all that. So, onto the cards that do help to get the Vileplume in play. We've got the 4 Ultra Ball, obviously, really good card. 4 Trainer's Mail, I think we need all 4 of them, because if we don't find our Forest of Giant Plants, we just cannot get the Vileplume up, and then we struggle very early on in the game, so we need to maximize our odds of hitting that. We're also running 4 Level Ball. 4 might be a bit excessive, but I have been very comfortable with it so far. Like, being able to get Oddish and Glue, I was either going to put in like a 3rd Gloom or I was going to put in a 4th level ball. And I think the 4th level ball just makes a ton of sense because it means we can control which one we take, the Oddish or the Gloom. It also means we can find the Bunnelby early on if we need to, and of course, if we just want to turn Level Ball into draw a card, we can just grab an Unknown with it instead. I get a lot of use out of these guys in the early game, of course, so I think the 4 count feels nice, but I could definitely see you dropping it to like 3 in favor of something else. The 2 Heavy Ball, like I said, are super cool. If you're not running a main attacker with a 3 retreat cost, then I wouldn't run the Heavy Ball just for the Vileplume, but I can get away with it since Giratina does have that cost. The other item card I'm running then is 3 Floatstone. You need to run this, basically. I know, again, back to Rory, who I've discussed this list with quite a bit, has said he swears by 4 Floatstone in this deck. I don't think it's necessary at all. I think I've had no trouble getting a Floatstone onto an Oddish or a Gloom. Like, every single time I get the turn 1 Vileplume, it always has a Floatstone on it, so I'm not too concerned by that. I think 3 is enough. I wouldn't go any lower than this, though. And if I did, I'd up the Olympia count, but I'll get onto that in a second. And finally, 2 Fury Belt. This is because it fixes a ton of math with Giratina. First of all, the extra HP is just great. You'll survive hits you otherwise wouldn't. But it also means the Chaos Wheel does 110 damage. And 110 means now you're killing Shamans in 1 hit, and also Megas that have like 210 and 220 HP, you kill in 2 hits as opposed to 3 hits. So, yeah, the Fury Ball helps you speed up your game a bit. So, and I have no trouble getting it on, especially with the Heavy Ball. It becomes really easy to get the Giratina down early on and get the Fury Belt straight onto it. So, I have no trouble getting one of them on. I think it's necessary anyway, just to win some games that you otherwise wouldn't. On to the supporters. And we have 3 Sycamore. You'll see there's a 3 Sycamore and 1 Misty's Determination. Misty's is a card I think goes really well in Vileplume because you don't want to keep digging with Sycamore and like have to discard stuff you don't want to discard. I mean, a lot of the time, like, your hand will just be items in a Sycamore, and that's cool. You can get rid of that. But sometimes, you know, you don't want to play that aggressively. You want to sort of sit back a bit. And Misty's is great at letting you do that. It basically means that when you, like, it's a supporter that lets you search for double dragon energy under your own item lock. And when you put it like that, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer. You have to include this. It also lets you discard a card from your hand, which is a great stipulation, actually, because we'll always have, like, a spare level ball or a trainer's mail that we didn't use in the first turn that we can just get rid of, no question. And as well as the forest giant plants become sort of dead after turn 1 as well, so there's plenty of stuff that we can actually just get rid of. So yeah, Misty feels fine. We've also got 2 Lizond. Again, like I said, the synergy with Bunnelby is awesome, and just Lizond in general is a good card. 2N, it was 3, but I'm not playing it as much as I thought I would, so it went down to 2. And 1 Olympia. So, people thought Vileplume was dead because AZ was no longer in the format. We had no way of switching it under item lock. How wrong you were, we have Olympia. So this is, okay, look, it's strictly worse than AZ in every possible way, but it does the job. It's a switching card that you can play under item lock, and that's all you need it to be. So unless you just switch one of your Pokemon and heal 30 from the one you switched. Like, it's fine. I don't think I'd run any higher than this. I think 1 is perfectly enough. This also helps you get around Fright Knight of Eltal, because otherwise they can just promote a Fright Knight, Lizond up your Vileplume, and then just wait for you to deck out because you can't retreat the Vileplume. Olympia is fantastic at helping out with that. It helps you retreat basically anything you have in the active anyway. Yeah, I appreciate this card a lot. I wouldn't go up. I wouldn't like up the count. You can mess around with like the Floatstone Olympia count if you really want to. You could even just drop the Floatstones altogether and run 4 Olympia if you're feeling super crazy, but I think 3-1 has been fine for me so far. Stadiums, of course, we run 4 Forest of Giant Plants and 1 Silent Lab. Silent Lab, like I said, we get a lot of use out of this because we can lock it in place with Giratina. Also, it gets around Fright Knight, so it's another way that we can sort of escape that. I also ran this as like a counter for Volcanion, because if Volcanion goes first and just explodes with items, it can be a little bit difficult for us to win that game. So I think Silent Lab shutting off Steam Up becomes really powerful in our favor. We can recycle this with Bunnelby as well, so it's like we have more than 1 copy. I know you might be thinking we have like Unknown, Shaman, Giratina, and Magearna are all basics with abilities, but Unknown and Shaman, you're only going to be using these guys like turn 1 probably. And obviously you will have Forest in play instead of Silent Lab in the first turn. Magearna, you don't need this in every matchup. Like, it's not something you're gonna be benching regardless of what your opponent's playing. It's just something you play depending on who you're playing against. And in Volcanion and most dark matchups, if they're not running Zorua, you won't need this guy. You can always just counter it again if you absolutely have to. Like, we've also got Giratina, who has Renegade Pulse, but again, if your opponent's not playing a Mega, you don't need this ability at all. So it's fine, we can shut off our own abilities for the most part. And finally, the energy is just 4 Double Dragon and 4 Double Colorless, keeping it super simple. So, there's a couple of other Pokemon you can run in this list. The first one, where are we now? I'm going to go to Hydreigon EX. So, this is not for the ability. Dragon Road isn't that great. Like, Manaphy EX is a way better retreating card if that's what you're after, but I'll get onto that in a second. I have a whole other build with Manaphy I want to talk about. But Shred is really the attack we have this for. So, like I was saying about Magearna, is that it gets around the weird things like Zorua, Trubbish, Jirachi. That kind of stuff is, like, you will play against that at the moment. But if you're worried about Jolteon EX and Regice, two cards which can be a pain to deal with, I admit, then you need something else that helps you with that. And Shred is actually a fantastic option for this. So Jolteon has 160 HP, which means Shred is killing it in 2 hits. Regice has 120, which means Shred kills it in 2 hits. You have 180, so they can't return a 2-hit KO. Yeah, Hydreigon puts in the work against those cards, and if you're super worried about them, then this is your go-to guy. It's a little difficult to set up alongside Giratina, so you might want to experiment with, like, Ninja Boy as well, so you can switch into it super easily. Or, like, after you've used Shred to kill a Jolteon, you can just Ninja Boy straight back into a Giratina. So there's a couple of different options, but I really do like this attack. I just don't think there's enough Jolteon and Regice going around in the meta at the moment to warrant me throwing it into the deck. You can also actually kill Promo Jirachi with it even after it discards the energy, because the invincibility effect will be removed. Let's see, what else do I have here? Mingino, yeah. Mingino. So, cleaning up discards a tool card attached to one of your opponent's Pokemon. The reason I'm throwing this out here is because if your opponent's playing Trubbish and they go first and they get a Float Stone on it, that can be annoying. Like, they just evolve to Garbodor and they get their items back. And there's not much you can do about it. You have to, like, Lizond it up and kill it with Giratina. But you can, if you're super worried about this, you can run this guy and you can use cleaning up to remove the Float Stone, and then you're back in the game. That's how it works. The other thing about this guy is that, like, you can also remove Assault Vests if anyone's playing those. I just don't think there's enough of a reason to play it. I think the odds of, your opponent playing Trubbish, like Garbodor in the first place, and having Trubbish and Flowstone in their hand and going first, like, I think that's such a niche situation that I wouldn't want to dedicate a whole slot in the deck to deal with it. But if you're worried about that, Minchino's definitely your answer to it. The other thing you can do if you're feeling super cheeky is actually run the Chinchino. Apologies, I had to cough there again. Yeah, you can run the Chinchino. The idea with this is, like, if you have a Giratina in the active and your opponent's two-shotting it, you can play Olympia to heal 30 from it and switch it into Chinchino, and then you can use Sweeping Cure to heal 90 more from it and, like, reset it, like, basically heal all of its damage, essentially. This is pretty fantastic. So, I mean, you're also promoting a non-EX, so you're, like, forcing the prize trade again. This is a really cute little play. I'd only run, like, a 1-1 line of it. It's level ball searchable, so getting it out early is fine. God, finding the space for it is the difficulty, but if you want to do something a little bit crazy, then this is definitely an option you can look into. What else do I have down here? Alright, on to trainers. Next one's going to be Acrobike. This is basically a card to help you get the turn 1 Vileplume up. From experience, I can tell you, this literally never helped me get a turn 1 Vileplume up. Every time I got the Vileplume into play, I never used Acrobike in order to do it, and every time I missed the Vileplume, Acrobike didn't help me. So, from experience, I can say that you don't need this, and I don't think it works. But I know some people swear by this card, and if you really are struggling to hit the Vileplume, then maybe give it a shot. The other thing that I really want in this deck, and I'm kind of debating between Olympia and this guy, is Team Flare Grunt. I think I can kind of get away with this because, like, this is a bit cheekier than Olympia. Because I think if you do, like, Olympia is really safe if you miss the float stone, which again, you just never will. But if you do miss the float stone, you're fine. You don't need to worry about it. Flare Run is a little bit cheekier because you basically, I mean, obviously it now means you absolutely have to hit the float stone. Although I do think the payoff is worth it because I think even one flare grunt could like completely change a match around. I think even like resetting your opponent back one attachment could just put a game in your favor so heavily. So I think it's worth running one copy of it. But again, in my own list, I think I'd cut the Olympia and put it in. For now, I'm going to keep playing around with the Olympia. Like I said, I just want to play something super safe and super vanilla to show off the deck at its best. And I think that is going to be all of the other additions that I was going to put in this deck. Now, there's a couple of other lists and variants I want to show off of this, so I'll just save this to make sure it's fine. Where are we now? Alright, this is a slightly different version of it. So, like I was saying about Giratina, it has this fairy weakness, which is kind of annoying. But we are running Magearna EX, and Magearna is a metal type, and fairies are weak to metal, so what if we ran 2 basic metal energy? So in order to fit this in, I've kind of gone down on the Giratina and upped these guys, so essentially we have now 4 attackers that we can use. So I think the way that I would want this to work is that if I was against obviously a fairy deck, I just power up one of the metal types instead. So Magearna's attack Soul Blaster does 120. That knocks out anything with a metal weakness. We can reset this by playing Olympia into something with a float stone and then just retreating, so Magearna gets its 120 back. But even if it's doing 60, that's not too bad. Like, with a Fury Belt, we're hitting 140, which is enough to knock out Xerneas, the Geomancy Xerneas. Even without a Fury Belt, we're doing 120, which is enough to knock out the Rainbow Road Xerneas. So Soul Blaster will still put in the work, even if it's only doing 60. So I think this is fine, actually. And it shouldn't be too difficult to set up either. The other thing is it allows you to run this super cool card in Vileplume, which is a Registeel. This is something I definitely want to play around with more, but so far I'm really enjoying it. Forbidden Iron Hammer does 70 damage, and if you're against an EX, you just discard an energy attached to it. How cool is that? Like, under Vileplume lock, you don't even have to flip a coin for it, you can just discard energies over and over and over again. That's pretty awesome. 70 damage with the Fury Belt, you're killing Xerneas Break. You're resetting your opponent back a few attachments, even if you're not against a fairy deck. Like, this will put in the work even against just general EX decks. Yeah, this guy's pretty cool. Other things about him is he has a 3 retreat cost, which means he's also heavy ball searchable. I actually really quite like this guy. And so far from playing around with this particular variant of it, I've quite enjoyed it too. It's something I think it still needs maybe a little bit more work, but that's a concept that I was going to play around with a bit to help the fairy matchups anyway. Alright, so we'll just quit out of there, and where are we now? Of course, I have to actually go here, because for the next bit I want to show off is... Yeah, I don't have the cards for it, so it says here 62 cards. Take this with a pinch of salt. I just wanted to show off a bunch of different options. So obviously this is not a solid list, this is just random stuff. This is Vileplume Manaphy. So there's no Giratina in this one, this is the whole other attacker. I wanted to show off the synergy that Vileplume has with Manaphy. So of course Aqua Tube basically lets any Pokemon with a water energy attached to it retreat for free. You can run this with Giratina, of course, because Double Dragon counts as a water energy, but I found that a bit awkward and completely inferior to the other Giratina version that I'm showing off today. So the reason this works with Vileplume is because I was talking about a lot about the whole Floatstone and Olympia thing. If you just run water energy and attach one to a Vileplume, you no longer have to worry about that. These become float stones that you can play under your own item lock. So, and that is pretty cool. That's pretty useful. On top of that, there's just an awful lot of water attackers that sort of go with Vileplume pretty well, I think. I also want to stress, though, that without much option to dig under your own lock, I think you want to run a pretty high count of basic energy. That's why there's 9 and 4, is because you just want to see it every turn. So I think it's important to run a high enough count because you just can't dig for it, really, like other decks can. So I think the best attacker that you can actually run with a water version isn't even a water type. Lugia is one of my favorite cards to run with Vileplume because it is so simple. Aero Ball does, we know what that does. It just does a bunch of damage, and you can do it for just a single attachment as well, which is great. On top of that, Deep Hurricane is also a really good attack. And we basically always have a Stadium card in play since we run 4 of our own. Yeah, this guy really does put in the work. I think it feels really smooth with Vileplume. And you can also run whatever text you want alongside it. I think if you don't own Giratina, or if you don't want to play the Giratina variant, I think just even Lugia and then some other type is a really solid archetype in itself. I think the Manaphy still just makes a lot of sense though. And also, there's not a huge amount of lightning in the format right now. I mean, I guess I haven't seen a huge amount of people running Raichu. I don't think loads of people are dedicating like a Zebstrike attack in their deck just to be Rayquaza. I don't think that's hugely popular, so you should be fine. The other one is Regice. The list of this that I'm currently running is actually like 2 Manaphy, 2 Lugia, 2 Regice, and then none of these other little techs. So, but the Regice is pretty cool, obviously. It's a bit like the Giratina in that it has like a locking effect in addition to the item lock that you already get from Vileplume. And it's easy enough to set up as well. It's a non-EX, which is great. Yeah, 70 damage, and you prevent all damage done by EXs. That's pretty good against a bunch of different things. It would really screw over the Giratina build I was just looking at. It also, like, you might say, oh, this is a way better Volcanion matchup. I doubt it does, because, first of all, you're not one-hit KOing Volcanion. They have baby Volcanions that they can use to one-hit KO you, and also that deck probably runs like 2 copies of Ranger anyway, so I don't think this is a great answer to Volcanion, but I don't know. Make it that way you will. Ice Beam also is a decent attack. Paralysis under item lock is also quite powerful, and it can set up a few other KOs. Like you can open with an Ice Beam if you don't have the energy for Resistant Blizzard. So it's a pretty nice card all the same, and I quite like it. And the other things that you can run. So the next cards are kind of just weird little tech options that I sort of thought of. This is still, a lot of this is just theory, to be honest, but there are other cards that I think still work well with the Vileplume. So there's Glaceon EX, which does Second Bite. Second Bite's nice at basically just finishing off anything. I think that's fine. And also Crystal Ray is like, we know how good that is. I just don't think there's enough evolution decks out there for me to warrant playing this. And again, Mega Evolution decks can just not Mega Evolve, I think, for the most part, to deal with the Glaceon. So I don't think there's a huge amount of merit to running it right now, but depending on how the format shapes up, this could end up being a really cool guy. We've also got Palkia EX. So setting up stuff under item lock can be a bit difficult. And that's kind of where the Palkia comes in, is that if we set this guy up with just 2 water energy, we can just use Aqua Turbo to set up everything on our bench. Like if we opened with this guy and just kept using Aqua Turbo over and over again, we could set up a bunch of things and be ready to go. Pearl Hurricane also isn't a bad attack. It's a little expensive, I admit, but other than that, it's fine. I think this attack is pretty nice, and you could do a variant which has like 2 Palkia in it, and you use it to set up Lugias and Regice and stuff like that. Feel free to experiment with that one. And the other guy is this one. I can't see how much use this would get. This is Manaphy from Primal Clash. I did not know this existed until I was actually just sort of looking at all the basic water types I could use in this list. So this guy, it's kind of cool, right? Deep Sweet Swirl will kind of help you out if you get end to a low hand size late game. It also just helps you. Sometimes you just draw dead with Vileplume. It'll make you draw dead too. That's kind of what it does. But Deep Sea Swirl can get you out of that, which isn't too bad. And when you can pivot with everything with Manaphy EX, this feels alright. Lifesaver as well. Allows you to recover Pokemon from the discard pile. I just think this guy's super cheap. It allows you to get around a couple of the problems the Vileplume causes for you. It's a non-EX, so you kind of get away with it for the most part. Yeah, if you have one spare, or if you want sort of a little more of a consistency boost after you've gotten the lockup, this might not be a bad option. Anyway, that is going to cover it. I think everything I wanted to talk about Vileplume. So let's see. There was one other thing that I'm just gonna leave this on screen. I'm not gonna discuss it because it's pretty terrible. But feel free to mess around with it if you want. Yeah. Whew. That was quite a lot of talking about Vileplume. There's a couple of other variants that I didn't even mention. The first one's Zygarde. We saw this kind of become a thing towards the back end of last season. I think Zygarde lost quite a lot. Like, it lost Karina and Lucario. Those were big cards in that deck too, but I think the biggest thing it lost was AZ. Because one really cool thing that could do was, if you had a damaged Zygarde in the active, you could play AZ, pick it up, play it back down, go into Carbink Break and just reattach all the energy that got discarded. All of a sudden, you've completely healed and completely rejuvenated your Zygardes. Not being able to do that is quite frustrating. So, other than that, there's also, like I said, Sam Huff's kind of rainbow Vileplume build. Can't really show that off super well on PTCGO because Ninja Boy is still banned. God damn it. And also, I think this kind of, it's one of the things I think I'd want to wait for the meta to settle a bit before I kind of tried picking that up. Before I tried kind of messing around with that a bit. Because the cards and the text you run in it will have to differ depending on what you're expecting to face. It also lost Aegislash-EX, which I don't think is it's not a loss it can't recover from, but again, I think it's a cool variant, but I want to wait and see what other people are definitely playing and what else becomes successful before I sort of settle on what kind of text I'm running with that. And also, I think Jolteon was one of the big features of that last deck, and I don't think that's as good now as it was last season, so it would need to be changed completely. Yeah, that's really all I wanted to talk about Vileplume. That was quite a lot of discussing. Yeah, I really like this guy. I hope you guys too. I hope you all learned something about Vileplume. I'm really glad I split this up into 2 videos because I've been talking for quite some time now. If you like the video format, let me know. I might try and do some more of this kind of thing in the future if I have more like cards that are like Vileplume that can be run in a bunch of different ways. I thought this was kind of a nice open way to discuss it and strategize with it sort of out loud. So yeah, I hope you guys learned something. I hope this sort of encourages everyone to get creative and think of some really cool builds that you can make with Vileplume. And if you want to see me play some games, link in the description, annotation on screen. You can go watch the other video. It should be up like 5-10 minutes after this one. So by the time this video is ended, the other one will be up basically. Yeah, anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.